There's a popular anecdote that Republicans like to relate. It involves the 1972 presidential election. Los Angeles film critic Pauline Kael famously said that she was shocked at the results of Nixon's landslide victory that year. And it was because she said, well, everybody I knew voted for McGovern. Well, the right continues to gloat about this to this day as an example of how out of touch with regular Americans liberals, Democrats, progressives are, according to them. 40 years later, it doesn't seem like we on the left have learned our lesson from that, at least if one looks at the results of Wisconsin's 2012 recall elections. I lived in Madison, I still do, and if you're like me, you probably noticed that those of us who live in Madison were very confident that we would defeat Scott Walker. You saw a lot of signs, saying Walker's goose is cooked. There were the ubiquitous Walker, your pink slip is coming signs. And the problem is that we have been so much inside our Madison liberal bubble that we tend to be complacent and unaware of what's going on in the rest of the state and how right-wing disinformation has such a huge effect in the rest of Wisconsin. Hopefully, we have learned our lesson this time. Hopefully, we understand that if we don't address the problem of right-wing media throughout the rest of Wisconsin, we will see our state continue to slide further and further to the right, and we'll continue to see the liberal oasis of Madison be more secluded and out of touch with the direction of our state. And we don't want that, obviously. So what can we do to change that? That's what I've been working on with the Media Action Center and with Wisconsin Grassroots Network. With the Wisconsin Grassroots Network, what we do is we focus on building and growing progressive grassroots community groups throughout the state, particularly in rural areas. There's already been some success in a couple of counties, and we're trying to expand that so that we reach the entire 72 counties of Wisconsin. Now, the Media Action Center is focused on media fairness, on addressing the problem with our publicly owned airwaves being dominated by right-wing views, and how we can get more of a diversity of views and opinion on the airwaves that all of us own together. One of the projects of the Media Action Center was earlier this year, before our June recall elections. 5 of us monitored the 5 local right-wing talk shows in Milwaukee to illustrate the evidence that they were breaking existing FCC law, specifically the Zapple Doctrine, which dictates that during the 60 days prior to any major election, if one side is given free airtime, the other side must be given comparable time if requested. And we proved definitively that these 2 stations were not following this law, and we have taken action with the FCC. Now, here's what's interesting about what we found. Now, I've traveled all around the country, and as we all know, there's a lot of right-wing talk radio throughout the country, in all the rural areas and in all the major cities. But what I've noticed is there's something very interesting about Milwaukee's talk radio market. In most other cities of comparable size, there's very little local programming. They syndicate the major shows, the Rush Limbaughs, Sean Hannity's, Glenn Beck's, what have you. And if there is a local show, it tends to be on the weekends or late at night, and the audience is small. Conversely, in Milwaukee, there are not 1, not 2, but 5 very successful and very skilled local right-wing talkers. These guys are very good at what they do, and they have been very successful in convincing a large number of Wisconsinites to vote against their own best interests. That's what they're paid to do. And what this is Milwaukee's being used as kind of a test market for this strategy of using local talent to promote right-wing causes on a local and state level. And they're going to expand this nationwide. if the success of Milwaukee's right-wing talk radio is any indication, they've even said this. In articles they've admitted this. We do this to influence the vote, and we're going to replicate this strategy around the state and around the country. So let me give you an example of what we're up against. The show I was in charge of monitoring was the Mark Belling Show on WISN. It airs from 3 to 6 p.m. weekdays. And what's interesting, what I found is you would be amazed at how not entertaining this show is from an objective standpoint. The host is as boring as he is boorish, but it's wildly popular. And I noticed that the same themes recurring over and over again. A lot of redundancy, a lot of repetition, and it works. It works. A lot of people listen, and it influences a lot of people. In fact, there was a study recently that found that 70% of talk radio listeners vote, which is roughly double the general population. So what are they hearing on Mark Belling's show? Well, one thing they hear almost every show is how liberal the media is. There's this huge liberal bias in the media, and us poor, helpless conservatives are so persecuted by the mean old liberal media. There was a ton of that, and so basically it's following the same Limbaugh-Hannity formula, only with local issues. Also, you saw every show rampant hypocrisy and projection, accusing Democrats, liberals, progressives of doing all of the things that they on the right, Scott Walker and his cronies, are actually doing, which is, of course, straight out of the Karl Rove playbook. And, of course, this show is riddled with lies, among them, for example, that Obama's stimulus didn't create any jobs. Of course, we know that's not true. There was rampant Democrat voter fraud in Wisconsin's elections. They often would say, Belling and every other one of these Milwaukee hosts would say, there's at least 2% of the Democrat vote is fraudulent. And of course, we know that's not true. The 2008 housing crisis is the fault of the government. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, those guys, when of course, every independent analysis of this has shown that the exact opposite is true. It was caused by the private sector, and Fannie and Freddie simply were pressured to participate. Belling and his co-hosts like to often say that Obama, his budget ideas were so bad that when he submitted them multiple times to the Senate, they were always voted down 99-0. Even the Democrats didn't want to vote for Obama's budgets. They were that horrible. Well, as it turns out, that's not true. The Republicans had submitted their approximation of what they thought an Obama budget would be, and that's why all the Democrats voted those down. As everybody knows, Belling and his right-wing cohorts love to claim that Obama's policies are what is causing this ballooning debt. And of course, we know that independent analysis has shown that that's not the case. Our debt is due mostly to Bush's tax cuts and the unfunded wars. And Obama's actual spending level is actually not that high. Also, Belling and his frequent guest, Scott Walker, loved to say that they love to mischaracterize the volunteers, the Democrat volunteers, as all coming from out of state. It's all out of state interests. It's not legitimate. When, of course, we all know that the exact opposite was true. Walker and his campaigns were the ones recruiting from out of state. Again, the Karl Rove playbook at work. Accuse your opponent of doing what you're doing. You'd often hear on Belling's show, like all the other Milwaukee talk shows, that there was this Wisconsin miracle under Scott Walker, that Wisconsin was just doing so great thanks to Walker's reforms. It was doing so much better than all the other states. When, of course, we've got the independent facts to show that the exact opposite, again, is true, that Wisconsin under Walker is actually doing worse than every other state in the Midwest in jobs, in economic growth. But this is what their audience hears, and their audience never hears any opposing view. They never know that this stuff is getting debunked, and that's why they vote against their own best interest, and that's why they've been so successful in making Wisconsin more and more purple and more red. Some people kind of dismiss this as, old media, traditional media. It's not relevant anymore, but actually there's still a huge market. A lot of people still listen to terrestrial radio and read papers, and they get their views that way. So what can you do about it? What can you do to affect the debate? You can join us at the Media Action Center. It's mediaactioncenter.net and tellfcc.com. You can contact the FCC, let them know what you think, what you'd like to see. You'd like to see them address these issues. The FCC is notorious for dragging its feet. That's why it takes public pressure from you and me to get them to do anything. Also, for more ideas, for strategies on how you can be persuasive and affect public opinion and bring those undecideds back to our side, check out my Daily Coast blog. I offer a lot of ideas there, and I'd be happy to get your feedback there.